week's chapter of Bleach, Shunsui Kyoraku unleashes the devastating power of his Bankai, the Katen Kyokotsu Kuramatsu Shinju, and everyone is feeling its deadly effects. I think it goes without saying that Lil Baro is pretty much screwed in this battle. I mean, the odds were already against him. He was fighting against Shunsui Kyoraku, the effective lead of Soul Society. But now that he's decided to reveal his Bankai to the world, I'd say that this is the final nail in the coffin for the god-obsessed Quincy. This week's chapter of Bleach was really freaking cool. The first half was pretty much just all of the characters reacting to the sheer power of Shunsui's Bankai. They were commenting that the skies were becoming dark, there was a sense of despair and chills in the air. And again, this makes perfect sense because Shunsui wanted to get as far away from people as possible, and apparently his Bankai covers a very large area. What's also really cool about this chapter is just getting to see some characters we haven't seen in a long time. Orihime, Chad, and frickin' Ichigo of all people. You remember Ichigo, right? The main character of the series? He actually decides to pop up in this week's chapter, and it looks like he actually ends up running into Naklavar, who was last seen fighting against Grimmjow Jaggerjax. Now, I don't want to admit that Grimmjow is defeated. I don't want him to be just introduced into the series just to be off-screened. I think that's kind of a disappointment, so I imagine he's going to pop in at any moment. But right after all of that, we go right to the battle between Shunsui and Lil Baro. And Shunsui is so cool. He doesn't even really look all that different. Like, he's just sort of slowly walking towards Lil Baro with no problems. And Lil Baro does this one big attack where it's like this massive beam of death, which just completely destroys and crumbles the ground all around them. It looks like it was like a one-shot type of thing, but because of Shunsui's Bankai, he's actually able to use this to his advantage, because apparently the Katen Kyokotsu Kuramatsu Shinju has these different levels of abilities. The first one actually makes it so that whenever Shunsui is hit by a very big attack, he's not actually going to be hurt, but his opponents are, because after Lil Baro does this big attack, there are these massive circular chunks which have just been ripped out of his body, and he's completely freaked out. Right after this, he activates his next level of abilities, which literally puts this like almost blood-like disease on his opponents, which causes them to bleed profusely and almost just completely get knocked out. It's the final ability where things start to get a little ridiculous. Apparently, he is able to summon all of this massive water, which engulfs both him and his opponents, and basically whoever loses all of their energy, their Ryatsu, or passes out first, loses. That is pretty freaking ridiculous. It's going to be a battle of resolves between Shunsui and Lil Baro. Now, I know the battle is not going to end this simply. I have a feeling that Lil Baro is going to activate some sort of crazy ability that's just going to have to push Shunsui even farther, and we're probably going to see even more levels of what his Bankai can do. All I know is this chapter was ridiculous. So what's the rundown on this week's chapter of Bleach? This one was really exciting, finally getting to learn a little bit more about Shunsui's Bankai, and it definitely goes in line with his Shikai, because of course his Shikai has a lot of different abilities, and so does the Bankai, each with their own specific level and ability. Now, I'm sure there are going to be more of these, especially after the big water one at the end. I still have a feeling that this is going to be a much more devastating technique than he's even letting on, especially because there's just been such build-up to it. But I honestly have no idea how Lil Baro is even going to get out of this situation, because he is a pretty powerful Quincy. But with everything that's going on right now, I just do not see him winning the battle, and the fact that he's one of the villains of the series really makes it seem like he's going to lose pretty quick. But Shunsui was just fan-freaking-tastic in this chapter. So incredibly confident. The way he was talking about those abilities was really cool, especially how he had sort of like a story that was sort of tied to every single one. Specifically Shunsui's second attack, which causes his opponents to bleed profusely. He actually equates it to a story of a warrior who was wounded on a battlefield, and when they were bedridden, their grief turned into this brand new illness. It's really great heavy writing combined with some amazingly badass action. Aside from all the Shunsui stuff, the other thing that I really liked about this chapter was just getting to see the old characters again. Orihime, Chad, and Ichigo are suddenly turning into the live-action Transformers, where they're like co-stars in their very own series. I have not seen that much of Ichigo throughout the final arc of the series. Aside from a few training scenes and a few action, that's about it. Basically, he's always just running around and making his way towards the goal, which is predictably going to be the end of the series. And just getting to see him is honestly a treat at this point. I really enjoy it. I also really would have liked if he'd have actually acknowledged that Naklevar looks a lot like Aizen, and that should totally freak him out. And of course, I like the fact that he's more concerned with the fact that something might be wrong with Grimmjow. It really shows how their relationship has changed over the course of the series. And I think it's only a matter of time before Grimmjow just erupts from the rubble, all super pissed off, and has his real battle with Naklevar. Maybe he'll actually team up with Ichigo against him. I think that would be really cool and a very interesting dynamic, because they still have a rivalry themselves. They still haven't had their real final battle. It sort of got interrupted, so this would be sort of like a funny way of forcing them to team up together. Ichigo good cop, Grimmjow bad cop. On the technical side of things, this week's chapter looked really good. All the character artwork was stellar, the action scenes looked really good, especially with Lil Baro destroying that entire section of the city. Then, of course, you had all of the attacks which were hitting him, like all the big chunks of his body looked really violent, him constantly bleeding, and that final panel, that giant watery abyss, looked so incredibly atmospheric. It continues to make me long for the return of the Bleach anime series. So this week's chapter had good artwork, very good pacing, lots of cool characters returning, lots of cool action, Shunsui activating his Bankai, getting to see all of the different abilities, Lil Baro destroying shit, and Lil Baro getting his ass kicked. This was a pretty solid chapter of Bleach. I do feel that the first half of the chapter was a little bit slow, but I still really loved seeing all of those characters again. Despite that, this was still a pretty fantastic chapter of Bleach, which is a great demonstration of Shunsui Kyoraku's Bankai. So I'm going to give this week's chapter a 4 out of 5. Really solid chapter of Bleach that any Bleach fan should definitely check out. Before you guys leave today, I would love to hear your thoughts about this week's chapter. What did you think about Shunsui's Bankai? Do you think he's going to have even more powers, more levels? Do you think that Lil Baro is somehow going to escape the dark abyss at the very end of this week's chapter? And what do you want to see from the rest of Bleach in its final arc of the series? Make sure to tell me in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching my review. Make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!